So Jan, let me get your slides up here, and any introductory remarks you want to make while I'm loading your slides.
Thanks, Ray.
Now.
I'll just add that I'm the program manager for the Michigan Agriculture Environmental Assurance Program, or MEAP, with the Department of Agriculture and Rural Development. And Ray, you can go ahead and go to the next slide.
All right.
Mission of this program is to develop and implement a proactive and confidential environmental assurance program that targets all size Michigan farms. Michigan has over 55,000 farms, and they range in size from a couple of acres to thousands of acres. The program targets all commodities. Michigan is second to California in the diversity of our commodities. We assure that farmers are engaging in cost-effective pollution prevention practices and that they're working to comply with state and federal environmental regulations. The program uses a systems approach. We have 3 systems: livestock, farmstead, and cropping. And farmers are encouraged to participate in as many of those systems as apply to their farm. What I'm going to do today in this short time is focus on a couple of areas that I receive most questions on. And Ray, you can move ahead. The first one is partnership. Michigan has more than 50 partners. These partners include agency, university, all commodity groups in Michigan, conservation groups, and environmental groups. These logos represent just a few of them. The partners are not just logos on paper, but they actively participate in our standards committees, in all of our systems committees. We have a communications outreach group that is actually the PR promotional people from a lot of our commodity organizations organize that. We have others task force like water monitoring and local resource groups. Next slide. How does MEAP work? MEAP is, I mentioned already that we have 3 systems, the farmstead, cropping, and livestock. Within each of those systems, we use a 3-phase approach based in education. That education can be, it's primarily locally led, either by conservation districts, local extension educators, some cases commodity groups where environmental topics are presented. They send the agenda to us ahead of time for approval. The second phase is the on-farm risk assessment. This phase is really critical to the program. I mentioned about all of the commodities that we have in Michigan. We have risk assessments developed specific to those commodities. And our conservation district technicians work one-on-one with farmers to go through those risk assessments, to develop an action plan based on the high-risk practices, and then to return and continue to work with those farmers as long as it takes, helping them move toward verification. Verification is the 3rd phase. That's a third-party verification done by staff here at the Department of Ag and Rural Development. Verification results in a 3-year designation as being MEAP verified. Next slide. I mentioned that second phase with the risk, developing the risk assessment. We have in conservation districts across Michigan 36 technicians that are devoted solely as MEAP technicians to working with farmers. Additionally, we have several programs that are done in cooperation with NRCS or other programs where we incorporate our MEAP risk assessments, so that farmers early on with the program here in Michigan ask us, and this remains a challenge, that all agencies get together and decide on what it is that farmers are supposed to do so that farmers have a clear direction and that we're all in agreement. So we work really hard at that. These risk assessments that you're looking at on this slide include the standards that are required for verification. It's a question format showing high risk, low risk, and medium risk answers. Also coded in those risk assessments are our right to farm GAMPs, state and federal environmental regulations. So the farmer knows if, for instance, they have a practice that's high risk, they might be violating a state law, and they might not be in conformance with our right to farm program as well. These standards are updated annually. Next slide. What does MEAP address? We look at a lot of different resource concerns. Again, I mentioned earlier we use a systems approach. The livestock system looks at everything related to manure management. Farmstead system focuses on fuel, pesticide, and fertilizer issues at the farmstead, as long as or along with wells, drinking water, those kinds of issues. Cropping, we look also at nutrient management plans, pest management plans, irrigation, water use, drift management plans, and those associated things. Next slide. Why do farmers participate? You know, we've done some survey work in Michigan looking at this question, and these little bullets are not necessarily in order of priority, but the first one that you see on the left, environmental concern, and the first one on the right, peace of mind and the right thing to do, those were two of the areas that drove farmers originally to ask for a program. It was in Michigan, we have a history of proactive programs that farmers are really involved in organizing at the start. And they were concerned with more and more regulations. They actually wanted to be, one of those bullets says, ahead of the curve. They wanted to be not just alongside the road as the bus went by, but they really wanted to be part of the driver as to what the program would be. Things like sending a message to their neighbors, to local townships, that they're reaching a high environmental bar are important items to Michigan. Marketing opportunities, some of our fruit and vegetable growers who are verified are able to use the logo both on their websites and some of their marketing efforts. So it depends on the farmer and the farmer's particular focus what the specific incentive is. And we try really hard to reach out and do as many incentives as we can to identify as many. One of the other ones I should mention on here, especially considering the audience we've got, is that we work very rigorously with NRCS to make sure that farmers that are involved in MAEAP and working toward MAEAP verification actually receive extra points in the ranking criteria toward EQIP. And that's significantly increased interest. Next slide. Back in 2001, we had legislation that was introduced and signed in Michigan, which actually put the program in law. The program structure in law is very much the same as the program existed since 2002. A few things were modified in that the standards that we follow are now outlined in law, how the standards are reviewed annually. They go to our Ag Commission for approval and recommendation to our director. The laws that outline these three incentives are found in Public Act 451 in Michigan. That's our Natural Resource, our Water Protection Act, in two specific parts. The one part outlines the structure of the program. The other part provides three incentives that are real important for farmers here in Michigan. One is if there's an accidental discharge, the farm would still have to be responsible for any resource damage, but it does not receive any fines or penalties. If the farm exists in an area that's a total maximum daily load, or a TMDL, and they're verified in all systems that apply to their farm, then they'll be considered as meeting all the required practices. And the third one is that the law actually states a defined rainfall. If a farm has a discharge and has followed all the practices that were necessary, then that discharge would be considered a non-point source discharge. They would have to do corrective action, but again would not have any fines or penalties. Next slide, please. This last year, our state government gave us $1 million extra to add more employees to the conservation districts, more verifiers here, an engineer, a little bit more administrative support. We actually grant out over $5 million to conservation districts for technical assistance. And this is all people on the ground working one-on-one with farmers. Some of those come from the Groundwater Fund in Michigan. Others are from state and federal sources, grant dollars that we've gone after. There's a reference there for our Groundwater Fund. Next slide. Just a little, a few pictures of a variety of farmers that are MAEAP verified. This is a sign that they display, that they can display on their property, on their farm property. Currently in Michigan, we have over 1,500 farms that are verified. That verification I mentioned earlier is good for 3 years. We have over 10,000 that have completed the educational part. We have a goal of 5,000 verifications by the end of 2015. and we're on a pretty fast track to try and accomplish that. Well, it takes most farmers 2 to 3 years from the time they start the program until they're ready for verification. Next slide. This slide has over on the left-hand side, the www.meap.org is where you can find program information. Information about the specific laws in the program are found at michigan.gov/MEAP, and you can also check us out on Facebook. Thank you.